The worst financial advice most people follow is just make sure the monthly payment is affordable. That thought usually shows up right after you fall in love with heated seats. What's missing is any discussion of what affordable actually costs you later. The system is built to shrink the problem down to one number so you stop asking other questions. Slowly, that decision eats flexibility, options, and a surprising amount of your future attention. So like and subscribe if you want to stay aware of these quietly stupid setups before they feel permanent. Because we're about to walk through what your car payment is really doing behind the scenes. There's a habit millions of people have where they call something an investment because it feels polite to do so. In basic terms, an asset puts money in your pocket and a liability quietly asks for more, and cars are extremely polite about asking. They don't demand rent, they just need fuel, insurance, maintenance, repairs, registration, and the occasional emotional reassurance purchase. Some people put their car on a net worth spreadsheet like it's a rental property, which is bold considering it's actively decaying. The value only exists if you sell it, and selling it usually feels like apologizing. I've done this too because it's comforting to pretend a necessity is also a financial win. And this framing works surprisingly well right up until the numbers start moving without your permission, which is where it quietly gets interesting. Have you ever wondered why your car suddenly feels older the moment you drive it home? That feeling is depreciation, which is just value leaving your life at high speed. A new car loses a massive chunk of its value immediately in a way that would cause national outrage if it happened in the stock market. If your retirement account dropped 20% in one afternoon, you'd call someone and breathe heavily into the phone. With cars, we nod, accept it, and say things like, "That's just how it works." We then repeat this process every few years like it's a subscription to disappointment. The system relies on the loss feeling normal, because if it didn't, the next step would feel a lot harder to justify. Most experts say the smart move is to focus on the monthly payment, which is exactly the problem. When you reduce a purchase to a single number, the brain shuts down everything else as a courtesy. Dealers know this, lenders know this, and your future self absolutely knows this. By stretching loan terms and adjusting interest, almost anything can be made to look affordable. This is how we ended up with 84 and 96-month car loans, which is just a mortgage with cup holders. You don't feel the total cost, you feel the rhythm of the payment, and rhythms are soothing until you notice how long the song actually lasts. Picture yourself still paying for the same car while the interior makes unexplained noises. Long-term loans create affordability by moving the pain so far away it feels hypothetical. You pay interest for years on a thing that is becoming less reliable by the month. At some point, the car stops feeling new, then stops feeling trustworthy, but the payment stays emotionally consistent. Ownership technically exists, just delayed, like a reward program you forget about. I've told myself this was fine because the payment fit neatly into my budget spreadsheet. That would be reasonable if the vehicle didn't age faster than the loan attached to it. Have you ever traded in a car and felt weirdly relieved instead of happy? That's often because the car is worth less than what you still owe, which is an impressive problem. The difference gets rolled into the next loan, where it disguises itself as part of a deal. This is how debt survives car to car, like a family heirloom no one asked for. Each upgrade feels like progress, while quietly stacking old mistakes underneath it. Nothing collapses immediately, which is why it works. It just gets heavier, and heavier things tend to affect what you do next. Most people believe newer cars are automatically more reliable, which is emotionally comforting and only partly true. Cars are necessities, so we like to treat higher prices as safety guarantees. In reality, reliability is about maintenance history and design, not how shiny the screen is. Manufacturers benefit from pushing new as synonymous with safe because it shortens replacement cycles. Meanwhile, perfectly functional cars get mentally downgraded for cosmetic reasons. I've trusted dashboards more than common sense before, so I get it. The problem is this belief feeds directly into the decisions that keep the whole system running. There's a small window where cars lose value faster than they lose usefulness, and nobody advertises it loudly. Around 3 to 5 years in, most of the dramatic depreciation has already happened. The first owner paid for the emotional experience of new, and you're just here for transportation. Mechanically, these cars are often fine, sometimes better understood, with known problems instead of surprises. Functionally, they do the same things, just without the new car smell and the identity upgrade. This feels wrong because we're trained to equate price with quality. And that discomfort is exactly what keeps people from noticing how uneven the trade actually is. Have you ever noticed how people treat used cars like haunted houses? Mileage sounds scary until you realize age, maintenance, and design matter more than a round number. A well-kept, higher mileage car is usually less risky than a neglected low mileage one. Inspections, service records, and boring paperwork quietly matter more than trim packages. Repairs aren't failures, they're scheduled consequences of owning a machine. Warranties sometimes help, sometimes just add anxiety in monthly form. And once you accept that nothing is risk-free, the decision gets oddly calmer. There's a moment when you realize the sticker price was just the cover charge. After that comes taxes, interest, insurance, fuel, maintenance, and small surprises that feel personal. Each cost seems reasonable on its own, which is how they slip through unnoticed. Over time, you've spent far more than the car is worth, and that feels awkward to calculate. The gap between what you paid and what remains is where the lesson lives. I avoided adding this up for years because it ruined the vibe. But the math exists whether you acknowledge it or not. Have you ever wondered what your car payment would look like if it quietly did something else instead? Monthly payments feel fixed and necessary like gravity, but money redirected is money that compounds somewhere else over time. Even modest amounts, left alone, turn into something noticeably larger. Instead, that cash funds a depreciating object you already stopped noticing. I've chosen convenience over math more times than I can count. And those choices tend to echo longer than expected. Most people think the only way out of a bad loan is panic or denial. Positive equity gives you options. Negative equity gives you lessons. Selling, refinancing, or simply keeping the car are all valid depending on reality, not feelings. The worst moves usually happen when discomfort demands immediate relief. Time and clarity often cost less than urgency. I've rushed decisions just to stop thinking about them. That instinct is understandable and also very expensive. Picture an SUV ad that implies everything outside it is actively trying to hurt you. Modern cars are already very safe, which makes fear-based upgrades subtle but effective. Each new feature adds a little protection for a lot more money. At some point, safety gains flatten while costs keep climbing. Premiums rise, payments rise, peace of mind stays roughly the same. I've paid for reassurance disguised as engineering, and once fear enters the equation, logic tends to step back quietly. There's a strange moment when a car stops being transportation and starts being a personality trait. Cars are one of the few purchases you display publicly every day, whether you want to or not. That makes them perfect tools for signaling success, stability, or having things figured out. We justify this with phrases like, "I deserve it," which sounds healthy until it requires financing. Validation feels better when it's visible, even if it's rented from a bank. I've absolutely enjoyed the feeling of being perceived as doing well. That feeling just happens to have a monthly fee attached to it. Have you ever thought about driving an older car and immediately imagined people judging you? That resistance isn't about the car, it's about what you think it says about you. Social comparison quietly fills in the story before you do. We associate newer cars with progress and older ones with failure, regardless of reality. Letting go of that script feels like losing status. In practice, it often feels like gaining breathing room. The tension is realizing those two things were never supposed to be connected. Most experts present leasing as flexibility, which is technically correct and emotionally misleading. You pay for the most expensive part of a car's life and return it before ownership matters. At the end, there's no asset, just the option to keep paying. It's a clean, predictable cycle that never asks you to stop. The upside is novelty. The downside is permanence. I've considered leasing because it felt simpler. Simple systems tend to be the ones you never exit. Picture paying monthly to unlock features already installed in your car. Modern vehicles increasingly behave like software platforms with wheels. Heated seats, performance modes, and data collection quietly move behind paywalls. Ownership becomes a conditional, temporary, and revocable. You bought the hardware, but you're renting the experience. I accepted app permissions without reading them too. And that trade feels small until control starts slipping. There's a point where a car has lost most of its value, but not its usefulness. Buying after major depreciation means someone else paid for the emotional premium. You're left with a machine that still has years of life. The strategy is boring, which is why it works. Maximizing lifespan beats maximizing novelty almost every time. I resisted this because boring felt like settling. It turns out boring compounds nicely. Imagine a month where no car payment leaves your account. At first it feels wrong, like you forgot something important. Then the extra cash starts stacking quietly. Redirected money changes trajectory faster than raises do. This phase doesn't feel dramatic, just calmer. I didn't believe it mattered until it did. Momentum shows up slowly, then all at once. Most people think rules like this are restrictive, which misses the point. Putting 20% down, financing for 3 years, and capping payments at 8% of income forces reality early. It makes expensive cars uncomfortable on purpose. The rule isn't about deprivation, it's about friction. Friction stops bad decisions before they feel justified. I ignored rules like this because they felt arbitrary. They're only arbitrary if you like learning lessons the hard way. Most rules about cars quietly fall apart when you have enough money to ignore them. High-income buyers paying cash don't experience the same trade-offs because math stops being emotional at that level. Commercial vehicles, specialized tools, or work-required trucks also live in a different category entirely. In those cases, the car is closer to equipment than identity. Sometimes buying new actually makes sense due to tax treatment, downtime costs, or reliability requirements. These scenarios exist, but they're rarer than people assume when justifying a trim upgrade. Most of us are not edge cases, we just emotionally cosplay as them. The system benefits when everyone believes they're the exception. What your car payment is really costing you isn't just money, it's silence around a decision that keeps repeating itself. It's not that you made a bad choice, it's that the system made the choice feel normal enough to stop questioning. Most people aren't reckless or irresponsible, they're just operating inside rules that don't announce themselves. And noticing that doesn't magically fix anything, it just removes the comforting story you were telling yourself. You still have the car, the payment still clears, and tomorrow still looks mostly the same. Awareness doesn't feel empowering at first, it mostly feels inconvenient. Because once you see how this works, you start noticing the same pattern elsewhere. Especially with people who earn good money and still somehow feel behind. That's where the next layer shows up, the one people usually chalk up to personal failure instead of structure. The Henry trap is basically that realization, just louder, more expensive, and harder to pretend you didn't see coming.